So as we're, we want to preserve the next 45 minutes to have some cross discussion. I think as we're listening to the various folks talking about their groups, what we're seeing is that everybody is working on things that are quite urgent, right? And almost nobody who's spoken here in a group is saying, oh, well, we want to stop what we're doing. How do we begin to do something where we don't give up what we're working on, but we can strengthen each other, set priorities, stay coordinated? How is that? How do we move in that direction? So as we open the floor now just for discussion, I hope people will somewhat address that, which is how do we set priorities, how do we coordinate, what do we build, and so forth.
Okay, we got to move on. Yes.
My name's Joy. Actually, this is more in the form of a question. What does history teach us about forming united fronts and coalitions? We're not going to reinvent the wheel. Are there, there have been many times of urgency, political urgency, in the last 100 years. Can we not? Are there any people here who know more about, the history of movement history than I do, who could point to ways in which solidarity movements have been built? Because I feel as though everyone is so scared. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? But it's been done before. How has it been done before?
I'm actually a foreigner. I live in Staten Island, which, by the way, is experiencing the beginnings of a major gentrification thing, which is, of course, unreported because that's the forgotten borough. It's mostly in the North Shore. London is now going to have the second largest Ferris wheel in the world because the biggest one is going to be in Staten Island, which is the centerpiece of this mega development in my neighborhood. At any rate, I was looking for a common theme to all these different, very interesting groups. There is a peace group in Staten Island which is very factionalized. But the common theme, of course, is the Trump threat. And my feeling is that the first major confrontation that Mr. Trump is going to experience is the Standing Rock situation. Which he has been asked about. He said, well, I'm thinking about that. But that is, I think, perhaps that may be one of the areas where support could be generated, because those people are really sticking it out, and they might win, and they're going to be right in Trump's face, and he's going to have to deal with it at the very first start. So I thought maybe that might be a common thread, because it brings together the environment and the confrontation with the new administration.
Okay, my name is Joan Hirsch. I live in Brooklyn. I work with Revolution Books in New York. This flyer that I passed out, not everybody got it, but it says, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist regime, and it's using the term fascist for a reason, because that's what it is. And this is unprecedented in the United States. This is the first time that an outright fascist has been elected president. And I think all the things that people said, the efforts and the movements and the organizing that's going on is extremely important, extremely necessary, was needed before, it's needed more now, but we're talking about a qualitatively different situation. But I do want to read something from this flyer. It says, fascism foments and relies on xenophobic nationalism, racism, misogyny, and the aggressive reinstitution of oppressive traditional values. Fascism feeds on and encourages the threat and the use of violence to build a movement and come to power. Fascism, once in power, essentially eliminates traditional democratic rights. Fascism attacks, jails, even executes its opponents, and launches violent mob attacks on minorities. In Nazi Germany in the 30s and 40s, fascism did all these things. This is where this can go. And yes, Hitler himself could talk graciously when he felt it would serve his interests and lull his opponents. There is a plan to stop, to an actual plan to create the kind of very telescope movement. If you should go to refusefascism.org.
Hi, Matt Weinstein from Brooklyn for Peace. Somebody said about a united front, talked about a united front. I think that's a very important point to stress. This is not the time for narrowness. It's time for a broad consideration of how to build the broadest coalition of all kinds of people, not just the left, but the center as well, not just Bernie supporters, but Hillary supporters, anybody who wants to join in to oppose the Trump regime and the Trump agenda. We welcome. Even those Trump supporters who will, and there will be them, there will be, they're in for a rude awakening. In Brooklyn for Peace, we say that war has been the creation, the origin of refugees. It's not the refugees that are the danger, it's war and continuation of war, and we have to oppose that.
Get together, sign a list, and create an organization where it's a board where they get together, whether it be twice monthly, once monthly, and coordinate efforts as far as what agendas they are working on, so that we all support each other, and that we can coordinate our efforts more strategically.
I just wanted to add one other event to the list of what's going on in this community. This coming Monday, the 19th, at St. Francis College from 6:30 to 8:30, he'll be having a meeting, coming together and he'll have groups that city councilmen have discretionary money that they give to grassroots groups. So some of the groups that Steve supports that are representing the most vulnerable in our community will be talking about different volunteer opportunities they have. So people who want some efficacy to feel like they're doing something, we can help these organizations build their capacity. So St. Francis on Remsen Street, right off of Court Street, thank you. And that's 6:30, Monday, December 19th. Did I say my name? Ellen Myers is my name.
Can we get a question queue going?
I really appreciated this suggestion over here. I just wanted to piggyback on it in terms of actually forming a structure to sort of make us have the strongest striking power as a united front. I think that we could even maybe do it neighborhood by neighborhood so that each organization is sending delegates to like a neighborhood kind of group that discusses the things they're working on, figures out how they could coordinate their activities, and then send it up to, and then like send delegates to a borough-wide body, a statewide body, borough-wide, citywide, and statewide bodies, so that it's both sort of rooted in the neighborhoods, but also able to coordinate all activities and act on it in a large-scale way. It's just a suggestion. Also, one other thought. My name is Cameron. I'm also a member of the Communist Party here. But the other thought I was thinking about is maybe just something for us to always keep on our minds as we're organizing. How can our activities, the way that we're organizing always ensure that we have sort of the most diversity possible in all the, gatherings that we have. So.
Hello, my name is Niels Chaplet. So I feel strongly about, I think it's wonderful to have all these groups and all these actions. It's amazing. But at the same time, we have the prospect of Trump. I don't understand why we don't organize something together before Mr. Trump gets into office, since he is unconstitutional. It's not a match to U.S. Constitution. So I feel it's mind-boggling to me, the excitement that is created around the prospect of him being in power and running the U.S. military and the powers that he's going to have with the cabinet that he's appointed. And I feel strongly that we should unite now and identify one event that we all go to oppose, literally, his presidency before we even speak about what we're going to do after the fact that he's elected, you see? So just as this lady was saying, we're not Germany in the 30s. This is America he has a very tiny portion of the population supporting him. In reality, it's less than 20%. So, we have to claim our right. And I'm surprised that we don't do that in a constructive fashion, identify one day, one moment when we declare our opposition straight up to this event. And since the Electoral College is going to vote on the 19th, well, maybe we should do something before that or on that day, just like Heather said before. And if that doesn't work, then we need to organize one more event, even greater, to simply oppose it. It's not possible.
Ruth Ben, New York City War Resisters League and National War Tax Resistance. And I guess another issue that connects us all is the federal budget and where all that money is going, and so much of it to the military abroad and militarization at home. So that's, of course, the issue that I'm particularly interested in and working on, but also anxious for some kind of coalition to develop. As with other groups, we are also looking to work together with others, and probably this idea that we have to keep meeting is part of it. Also with National War Tax Resistance, our emphasis this year is, and always really, is divest from the Pentagon, invest in people. So as you take, if you're willing to do an act of civil disobedience and refuse to pay some more taxes, you can also give that money to some of these other projects that are going on, and give the money where the federal government isn't putting it or going to put it, no matter who's president, actually. So anyway, I have a few cards and a few pie charts, and if people want to be in touch, we're happy to also do workshops and meet with other groups. So.
I'm Herb Miller, pastor of Park Slope United Methodist Church. And I want you to, first of all, to let you know briefly that on January 22nd, we're hosting an open space organizational meeting to help those in the community to organize at the grassroots, where people can come and share their ideas and see whether they take any traction and meet with others who share common themes. Also doing some anti-violence training. But in terms of holding all these disparate organizations together, both, I think, some kind of regular meeting where representatives could go to, but also some kind of web-based clearinghouse of information. It's hard when we have different organizations, when we don't know, that could easily be accomplished with some kind of web presence where people were able to post information, movements, and any ideas that people have that haven't been picked up by other organizations, because maybe some of the others will.
My name's Mario. I'm a member on the Finance Committee on WBI and the CAB, the Community Advisory Board. We're meeting this Sunday at 60 Wall Street. So what I often hear is the description of the enemy, the shark, and then I hear groups that want to get and attack a different piece of the shark. It'd be great to get the whole shark. Lately, I've been sharing my idea about this, and so I'll share it here. I think that the protests are needed, but they often are inconvenience the working people, mostly, and they're in the wrong place. I'll give you an example. Zuccotti Park was a nice idea, but they closed the wrong park. They should have closed Park Avenue. So these protests, I'd like to see them in different neighborhoods, not this piece of concrete that's 60 stories high. You know, it's time for break out of the box, and, you know, I'd like to see 10,000 people shut down Long Island somewhere, you know, and then after that they close down Barclay Center, and then after that they close down Park Avenue instead of Trump Tower, where I'm taking the bus and going downtown, and it just messes everything up, and cops are making overtime and all this other stuff. You know, have a small group go there, and then the rest of the group goes somewhere else.
Yeah, I just want to build off of something I was said earlier. It's amazing to me in some ways to see the broad range of people who have been propelled into political action as a result of Trump being elected. I'm still friends with a group of people from high school that are a pretty mixed bag politically, and it's really been fascinating to see some of their reactions. So this has the potential, I think, as people have been saying, to really broadly bring people together and unite. And on this, what could be done? I mean, I have this paper here. I'll give you a copy. Et cetera. It has a bunch of ideas that have been talked about. But I think Brooklyn for Peace has a history of organizing big meetings. I remember a few years back, 1,000 people, 1,200 people. I think what would really be very productive and worthwhile would be to put out a call from Brooklyn for Peace or from a coalition of groups even in here for a citywide campaign against hate crimes and attacks on immigrants. NYU, LIU, CUNY Grad School, because really the more you go to these things, the more you realize and hear what people are already doing in their communities. So I think that there needs to be some kind of catalyst, some likely force that could in fact put out a call for a meeting to build a campaign against hate crimes in New York City, and I nominate Brooklyn for Peace.
My name is Marie Edwards. Wondering if there's anything going on with the March on Washington, the so-called Women's March. And I think to me that's a good place to protest, to see hopefully tens and maybe hundreds of thousands of us.
So I have a couple of questions to put to you, but one is, what would it look like for Brooklyn for Peace to do an action, to do something, and to invite other folks in as allies and build relationships through that? Because we know that you don't build relationships in abstract or on coffee dates, but you build trust and relationships by doing things with people. So what would that look like? And another question I want to raise is, there are several thousands of years of organizing experience in this room, and self-included, there's a lot of privilege in this room. And what does it mean for Brooklyn for Peace to put its privilege, to leverage its privilege to be able to do a lot of the work that you all want to be doing? Specifically white privilege, because there is, it's a very white room, let's be real. But there are lots of other kinds of privilege in this room. There's education privilege. We're all using these big words. Right, so thank you, I thought you left. So those are my two questions. Like, what does it look like for Brooklyn for Peace to be doing something and to use that as a way to build relationships with other groups? And what does it look like for this organization to put leverage lots of privilege in the service of doing some big organizing work?
I'm Martha Cameron. I'm with Brooklyn for Peace. The woman over here who raised the issue of how do you build a united front, I think this is similar to what the sister over here is talking about from the Brooklyn Movement Center. And I think we have an example already in existence of a place to jump off from, and that's the program, the 120-page program of the Movement for Black Lives. I think that it's organized, it's looking at things nationally. It has a lot of things that's not included in there, like the real issue of climate change, the real issue of war. But I think we need to look at national organizing and national programs like that, because we need to act nationally and have a set of demands, such as the demands that were never made at the People's Climate March. We need a set of demands that say protect health care, for example. That's going to be one of the first places that Trump is going to attack. Stop the privatization, stop the neoliberal attacks. They're coming down on everybody. Stop the attacks on immigrants. Stop the attacks on people of color. But have a national program that a broad range of people could unite around. And that's something I think we all need to struggle for. So that's my point.
Okay, Ken?
The reason I've taken the microphone again is to tell you that the Brooklyn Progressive Action Network has been created in order to perhaps, just perhaps, serve as the clearinghouse that many of you are talking about, because we are looking to have groups, disparate groups, join our organization as chapter members and as affiliates. And it would be the kind of organization that diverse groups could participate in, from East New York to any of the others who have spoken tonight. So I just wanted to make it clear that the Brooklyn Progressive Action Network is looking to build that kind of a coalition and those kinds of linkages, as does the entire New York State Progressive Action Coalition wish to do.
Hello, my name is Kenneth Sullivan. I'm a producer of a cable access show here in Brooklyn called Ground Zero. This young lady here, I come from an institution where she taught at a city college, Center of Worker Education. That's where I learned this craft. And I'm here to talk about basically the 800-pound gorilla that's in the room that that nobody's talking about. As we know in the news right now, they're talking about Boris and Natasha. If you don't familiar with Rocky and Bullwinkle, they're trying to say that the Russians are responsible for Trump. Whereas we know, especially if you supported Bernie Sanders back in the primary, we know who the culprit was, and that was the corporate news media. And one of the people, Les Munez of CBS, he said this about the bonanza that they made off of Trump, the ratings bonanza, the money that they made. And this is what he said: "It may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS." Okay? So if we really have a culprit in here, and all of these groups that are in here, we have a common adversary, and that is the corporate news media in this country. It's something that the left, I've seen movements about reform, but we haven't really gotten there with it. We talk about the internet all the time, but we seem in this country like we see terrestrial radio and television to the right wing, and we talk about preventing war, where the corporate news media is used to manufacture consent among the population for these wars. We have to understand that the corporate news media is an adversary, and the left has to grapple with trying to reform this news media in this country. Not like this current administration did, where they put somebody in it that used to be a lobbyist for the telecommunications industry, and he gave campaign dollars to Obama. Somebody more progressive should have been the head of the FCC. That's something that in these movements that are going to come, the left has to really have a movement of reform of the media in this country.
That there is an upsurge throughout the borough, throughout the country, and it's happening. And the question we keep saying is, how do we do it? How do we pull ourselves together? I think what we have to do is we have to trust in the upsurge, call the organizations that we're aware of, some of whom were a surprise to us tonight by some of us, but there are many more. Put a call out in Brooklyn and get people together and see what comes from that. In other words, bring people together and let that germinate. And I think that's a step we should begin. Now, the question is who should call it, whether it should be NIPAN, whether it should be NIPAN or Brooklyn Progressive Action Network, however you want to call it, or Brooklyn for Peace. Maybe it should be the Brooklyn Movement, and it should be 3 or 4 lead organizations that have credibility and can pull people together. And I think, call for a borough-wide meeting. You had 2,000 people that went to the Garfield synagogue 3 weeks ago. I mean, it was incredible. And there are thousands of people who are ready to get into motion. And I think we have to step up and do it. And pull people together and say, let's see what we can do.
I'll be super brief. I just wanted to first of all second this notion that we need to think nationally. The reason we're all here is because we're facing a national threat. But additionally, I want to say that we know almost for sure that bad things are going to happen. And so I think in addition to the things that have been talked about so far this evening, that there needs to be a lot of focus now amongst us all, wherever we are, whatever we're doing, on tactics. What are we going to do in certain contingencies? I think we're going to need to be a lot more militant than we've been any time lately, and then we need to start thinking about, for example, civil disobedience tactics that dramatize situations, dramatize issues, dramatize threats to individuals and groups. So That's my pitch. I just want to say tactics.
The people who've talked about building coalitions, I do think we need to, acknowledge the fact that this is a room of privilege in the sense that we're mostly a white group of people, and that, we do need to acknowledge that. We do need to move across, before we get national, let's get across Brooklyn. Let's move. Let's get together with organizations that are all across this wonderful borough of ours. And I want to back up what Martha said also, which is that there is a platform, the Movement for Black Lives platform, which I have read, although I haven't studied, does lay out all of the issues that we've talked about tonight. And it would be, I think it would be a very good idea for folks to look it up online and read it, and use that as a starting point. Thank you.
Speaking about what privilege to leverage, I just moved here from Washington, D.C., where we have taxation without representation. And I haven't, I'm so excited to have elected officials to hold accountable. I'd like to, I would really like to be doing that. And then but that is a privilege that we have. And we're talking about defending undocumented immigrants. That's something that they don't have. We have our vote, and we need to really be after these people. And the other thing is the goal of this, one of the goals of fascism is to create a slave economy. And what all the people that he's putting in this cabinet are people who are standing to make financial profit. And another thing that we can leverage is our economic power, and is to boycott and to hold accountable all the companies and all the individuals that are standing to profit from this regime. We really need to go after them and name them and hold them accountable. They're all lining up, to make money, and they say they want to create jobs. I know they want to create slave labor jobs. So that is, those are some of the privileges that we can leverage: our vote and our economic power.
But hang on a second. Talking about privilege, I want to exercise mine for just 1 second and say that one of the things that's been very important to me, and I would suggest it to other people, is that short of building coalitions, people should go to the meetings of other groups and find out who they are, what they're doing, and become acquainted with groups in your neighborhood and groups in the neighborhoods next to you.
I'm going to ask you once again, if you're interested in going on the National Women's March, remember this website, cbidems.org. How many seniors in the audience? I don't know what a senior is. $35 round trip. They only have 2 buses. Do it fast. cbidems, D-E-M-S.org. $35 round trip. Leaves from Park Slope, 4:30 in the morning. Comes back that night. You can sleep on the bus.
From just being here this evening, we'll begin thinking about what are some of the next steps that we can take. And I think for all of us, and I think I speak for all of us, that one thing that is absolutely clear, which is that all of us together have to find a way to resist what's coming. And I think we're going to do that work. So thank you again.